You've scrolled through countless leadership articles, filling your head with theories. But Brené Brown challenges this. Knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. Forget intellectual understanding. We're diving into the paradox of true courageous leadership, skills so deeply ingrained they become instinct. Ignore this, and you'll forever chase fleeting insights instead of embodying impact.
Welcome to Audiobook Bites, where we distill powerful insights from transformative books into actionable wisdom. Today, we're diving into Brené Brown's Dare to Lead, specifically the groundbreaking chapter on vulnerability, the undeniable birthplace of courage. For too long, vulnerability has been misconstrued as weakness, a fatal flaw in the armor of any aspiring leader. But Brené Brown's research unequivocally reframes it, not as emotional fragility, but as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, the very crucible where courage is forged. Daring leaders understand that without leaning into this kind of vulnerability, there can be no innovation, no creativity, and certainly no genuine connection. It's the willingness to show up fully, even when there are no guarantees, even when the outcome is unclear. Think about it. How often do we see organizations or even individual leaders fall into the trap of what Brown calls armored leadership? It's the unspoken rule that you must always project invincibility, always have the answer, never admit a mistake. You might be thinking, that's just professionalism, but this rigid facade often masks a deep fear of failure, stifling the very creativity and problem-solving needed to thrive. Therefore, true leadership demands a willingness to drop the act, to be real. Here's the catch. When we perceive vulnerability as a weakness, we often create a culture where difficult truths go unsaid, where new ideas are never shared because the risk of looking wrong is too high. Imagine waking up tomorrow in an organization where admitting you don't know something or sharing an unfinished, raw idea isn't met with skepticism but with genuine curiosity and collaborative support. How would that transform your team's output? How would it change your own sense of psychological safety? This shift requires us to challenge deep-seated personal and organizational myths. We've been told explicitly or implicitly that showing our cracks invites criticism, that it opens us up to attack. But as Brené Brown reminds us, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly. It is the willingness to step into that arena, messy and uncertain, that defines true leadership. Consider this. A crucial element of daring leadership is building trust. But how do you build trust without exposing your authentic self, without sharing the parts that feel uncertain or risky? We discover a profound truth. We need to trust to be vulnerable, and we need to be vulnerable in order to build trust. They are two sides of the same coin. When a leader admits they made a mistake, or asks for help, or shares a fear, they're not just being nice. They're actively constructing the very foundation of trust within their team. This isn't about oversharing every personal detail, but about bringing your whole authentic self to the work, including the courage to say, I don't know, or I need support. The bottom line, vulnerability isn't a leadership option. It's the non-negotiable path to courageous, innovative, and deeply connected leadership. If you want to cultivate a workplace where courage thrives and innovation flows, subscribe to Audiobook Bites so you don't miss our next deep dive into practical strategies for daring leadership.
2. The foundation of connection. We often hear leaders lament a lack of trust. It floats around boardrooms and team meetings like a mist. Everyone knows it's important, but few can grasp it, let alone build it intentionally. It feels like an emotion, a vibe, something you either have or you don't. But Brené Brown, ever the pragmatist, challenges this notion head-on. She insists that trust isn't ethereal, it's a structural beam, engineered from observable, repeatable behaviors, and she gives us the blueprint, braving. This powerful acronym, boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity, transforms trust from a vague, warm feeling into a tangible, actionable framework. It's the difference between wishing for a strong house and laying a concrete foundation, brick by brick. Brown understands that, as she puts it, knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. Braving is how trust gets into your bones and into the bones of your team. Let's quickly dissect what each letter means, because the devil, or rather the trust, is in the details. B is for boundaries. This is about respecting what's okay and what's not okay, and having the courage to communicate those limits. Imagine a project manager who consistently allows scope creep because they dread difficult conversations. They're eroding trust with their team and clients, not building it. R is for reliability. Do you do what you say you're going to do? Every time? Not just the big promises, but the small ones too. A leader who always arrives late to meetings or constantly misses deadlines unknowingly chips away at the reliability bedrock. A is for accountability. Owning our mistakes, apologizing, and making amends. Think of a CEO who publicly takes responsibility for a product failure rather than blaming their team. That single act of humility can forge more trust than a year of feel-good initiatives. V is for vault. This is about confidentiality, not just secrets, but also not gossiping. It's a sacred container. When a team member shares a struggle in confidence and it later becomes office chatter, the vault is shattered, and with it, safety. I is for integrity, choosing courage over comfort, doing what's right even when it's hard, inconvenient, or unpopular. Picture a manager who stands up for an employee facing unfair criticism from an executive, rather than staying silent to avoid conflict. N is for non-judgment. This isn't about condoning bad behavior, but about allowing people to struggle, to ask for help, to be themselves without fear of being shamed or dismissed. It's creating a space where vulnerability can breathe. As Brown wisely reminds us, we need to trust to be vulnerable, and we need to be vulnerable in order to build trust. Non-judgment is the oxygen for that trust-vulnerability cycle. G is for generosity, assuming the most generous interpretation possible of someone's intentions, words, and behaviors. When a colleague misses a deadline, do you immediately assume malice or incompetence, or do you consider that they might be overwhelmed or dealing with an unseen challenge? Generosity offers grace, creating room for connection. You might be thinking this sounds like common sense, but here's the catch. Common sense is not always common practice, especially when courage is required. And it gets worse. In the heat of a deadline or a difficult conversation, our natural instinct often defaults to self-protection, which unravels these braving behaviors. But therefore, by consciously internalizing each element of braving, we can transform trust from a fragile hope into a robust, observable practice. Imagine leading a team where every member inherently understands and practices these elements. Picture an organization where the level of trust can be assessed, not by vague employee surveys, but by asking, are we upholding our boundaries? Are we reliable? Do we practice accountability? This isn't just theory, it's a toolkit for real-world leadership. Your next step is to not just understand these words, but to actively observe where they show up, or don't, in your own leadership and within your organization. The bottom line: trust is the consequence of a series of intentional, courageous acts, not just good intentions. 3. Choosing courage over comfort. We've all worn it, haven't we? That invisible suit of armor we pull on when vulnerability feels like a threat. For some, it's the polished plate of perfectionism, demanding impossible standards from ourselves and others, terrified of error, because a mistake feels like a personal failure, a declaration of, I'm not enough. For others, it's the thick, sound-dampening cloak of numbing, escaping discomfort through relentless busyness, endless email chains, or checking out mentally during crucial conversations. We distract ourselves, push down difficult emotions, all to avoid the raw discomfort of uncertainty. And then there's the more aggressive shield, wielding power over others, believing that control and dominance are the ultimate protection against chaos or dissent. These aren't just personal quirks, they're deeply ingrained behaviors we adopt, often unconsciously, to sidestep genuine exposure. You might be thinking, but wait, isn't some self-protection necessary in leadership? The stakes are high and criticism is constant. And yes, prudence is wise, strategic planning essential. Here's the catch. This armor, while offering a fleeting sense of security in the moment, constructs a chasm between you and your team. It insulates you, yes, but it fundamentally isolates you. Imagine a leader encased in an impenetrable shell, unable to truly hear the whispers of concern, unable to offer genuine support, or to foster an environment where creative risks and bold ideas can actually take root? When your team needs to trust you with their own vulnerabilities, their own experimental solutions, their own fears, what do they encounter? Not a partner, but a formidable wall. The knowledge of brave leadership remains theoretical, a rumor, until it truly lives in the bones of practice. But it gets worse. This constant self-protection drains your energy, stifles innovation, and inevitably corrodes trust. When leaders are preoccupied with defending their own positions, with ensuring they never look wrong or inadequate, they divert precious intellectual and emotional resources away from what truly matters: problem-solving, connection, and growth. As Brené Brown powerfully states, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings, or squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage ineffective and unproductive behavior. This is the profound, long-term cost of armored leadership, a culture steeped in managing symptoms and dysfunction rather than cultivating daring, honest engagement. We become so focused on not falling or not appearing weak that we forget how to truly rise, how to innovate, and how to inspire genuine belonging. The real danger, though, is the insidious way this armor prevents us from showing up fully, authentically. We stay on the sidelines, safe from the sting of judgment, yes, but also safe from the profound satisfaction of making a real, courageous impact. We actively avoid the arena. And what is leadership if not stepping into that arena, risking failure, risking criticism, risking the raw discomfort of true connection, but ultimately risking greatness? We deny ourselves, and critically our teams, the chance to truly rumble with big ideas and complex problems, all because we're prioritizing comfort over courage. Therefore, the path to daring leadership isn't about strengthening our shields or perfecting our defenses. It's about developing the self-awareness to recognize what triggers us to armor up, understanding the deep-seated fears behind it, and then bravely choosing a different way. It's about recognizing that our greatest strength often lies not in our invulnerability, but in our willingness to be seen, imperfections and all, and to encourage the same in others.
The bottom line: the credit truly belongs to the leader who dares to enter the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. 4. Your North Star in the dark. In the complex landscape of leadership, our values are meant to be our unwavering North Star. But often, we treat them like decorative plaques on a wall, nice to look at, rarely consulted for direction. This chapter of Dare to Lead doesn't just ask us to identify our values, it challenges us to live them. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads in the dark, and a critical decision looms. What beliefs are so fundamental, so deeply ingrained, that they light your path? Brené Brown urges us to pick one or two core values, not a laundry list, but the non-negotiables. These are the filters you use to make hard decisions, the essence of who you are at your best. For me, integrity and courage often surface. These aren't just words, they're the lens through which I try to view every tough call, every challenging interaction. Here's the catch: simply naming your values isn't enough. You might be thinking, I know what my values are, but it doesn't always feel like I live them. That's because abstract words like integrity can stay stuck in our heads, beautiful but inert. We need to get them into our bones. The true power emerges when we translate these abstract ideals into concrete, observable behaviors. What does integrity look like when you're at your best? For me, it means I communicate transparently, even when it's uncomfortable. It means I follow through on commitments, no matter how small, to build trust. But it gets worse. We also have to identify what Brené calls slippery behaviors. What does living outside your value look like? For integrity, it might be avoiding difficult conversations or making excuses for missed deadlines. This is where Brené's wisdom hits home. a truth that echoes through the halls of effective leadership. Knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. Our values must move from mental concepts to muscle memory. We have to feel them, act them, making them palpable in our everyday leadership. Imagine waking up tomorrow with a clear behavioral roadmap for your core values. When conflict arises or a difficult conversation needs to happen, instead of fumbling, you instinctively lean into those defined actions. You're not just trying to be courageous, you're doing courage. This operational clarity doesn't just make you a better leader, it makes you a more grounded, authentic human being. It provides that moral compass, sturdy and true, especially when the fog of uncertainty rolls in and external pressures try to pull you off course. Many leaders acknowledge the importance of values, but struggle to embed them in daily practice. Therefore, this process pushes us to define not just what our values are, but what they do. It transforms intention into action, a quiet whisper into a powerful, consistent roar. The bottom line: your values aren't just who you want to be, they're the behavioral blueprints for who you are when it matters most.
5. Curiosity and grounded confidence. Let's face it, those tough, vulnerable conversations at work, most of us would rather do anything else. We see the storm brewing, and our instinct is often to either duck for cover or charge in with an arsenal of assumptions, hoping to win. But daring leaders, as Brené Brown illuminates, don't shy away from these moments. They rumble. A rumble isn't a brawl. It's a discussion, a debate, a conversation characterized by genuine curiosity, a willingness to lean into discomfort, and a commitment to staying grounded in our values. Here's the catch. Many traditional approaches to conflict resolution often fail because they lack the foundation of trust and openness. We come in with our defenses up, already convinced of the other person's intent. But this adversarial stance only entrenches positions and erodes connection. Therefore, Brown teaches us to equip ourselves with practical rumble starters that transform potential clashes into opportunities for understanding. Imagine you're facing a situation where a team member consistently seems disengaged during meetings. Your usual approach might be to privately stew, then eventually, perhaps even passive-aggressively, address their attitude. But what if you started with a rumble starter instead? Picture yourself saying, "The story I'm making up right now is that you might be feeling disconnected from our goals, or perhaps overwhelmed. I'm genuinely curious about what's actually happening for you." Or perhaps in a moment of team tension, you offer, "We're both dug in here. Tell me more about your passion around this." These simple phrases are invitations, not accusations. They open a door. The secret sauce to making these starters work, to cultivate a truly courageous culture, is curiosity. It's not just a skill, it's a primary stance. When you approach difficult conversations with an open mind, genuinely seeking to understand, you disarm the situation. As Brené Brown reminds us, we need to trust to be vulnerable, and we need to be vulnerable in order to build trust. Curiosity is the bridge to that vulnerability, paving the way for trust to form even in turbulent waters. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds simple, but it feels incredibly difficult to do in the moment. And you're right. Leaning into these conversations means confronting our own discomfort, our own armor. But here's the undeniable truth, as Brown so powerfully states. Leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings, or squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage ineffective and unproductive behavior. The investment in rumbling pays dividends. This is where grounded confidence comes in. It's the potent combination of acquiring these rumble skills, committing to genuine curiosity, and then most crucially, consistent practice. Because as the Asaro tribe's wisdom reminds us, and Brown echoes, knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. You have to feel it, live it, embody it. Imagine waking up tomorrow and facing that challenging conversation with a new toolkit, feeling anchored not by control, but by curiosity and courage. Picture your team building deeper connections, resolving conflicts faster, and innovating more freely, all because you dared to rumble. The bottom line: true leadership isn't about avoiding the arena's dust and sweat. It's about stepping in, armed with curiosity, and knowing how to rumble effectively. If you want to transform your leadership and master the art of courageous conversations, subscribe to Audiobook Bites so you don't miss our next deep dive into practical wisdom.
6. The reckoning, the rumble, the revolution. In daring leadership, falling, failing, and experiencing setbacks aren't just possibilities, they're guaranteed. The true test of courage isn't whether you avoid the stumble, but how you learn to rise after it. Brené Brown's Learning to Rise chapter delivers a profound, actionable framework to do just that: the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. It's a powerful path to transforming defeat into data, fostering self-compassion, and ultimately building unstoppable resilience. Think of it this way. You've poured weeks into a high-stakes project proposal. You present it to the executive team, heart-pounding, convinced you've hit a home run. But the room is silent. The questions are pointed, skeptical. The energy deflates, and your brilliant pitch fizzles out. The proposal is rejected. The reckoning is that immediate, visceral hook of emotion. For me, it often manifests as a hot flush of shame, a tight knot in my stomach, and an endless loop playing the worst moments of that meeting in my head. I'd replay every hesitant word, every averted gaze from a leader. My brain would start constructing a narrative. I'm clearly not cut out for this. My ideas are flimsy. I'm a fraud. This is the critical first step, recognizing when emotion has got its hooks in you, whether it's shame, anger, or deep disappointment. It's the pause before the spiral, the moment you realize you're no longer just experiencing the setback, you're being defined by it. The rumble is where the real work and often the greatest discomfort begins. This is where you bravely own your story, but not the shitty first draft SFD your fear-fueled brain just wrote. My SFD for that rejected proposal was, I am incompetent. But that's just a rumor in my head. The rumble challenges it. It asks, what are the facts? What did I actually do well? What was outside my control? What did the critics say, and how much weight do I give it? You might be thinking, but isn't this just self-pity? Absolutely not. This is a radical honesty combined with fierce self-compassion. This is where you remember that it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. You were in the arena. You dared. Now, you dissect the experience not to wound yourself further, but to truly understand. This introspection often uncovers hidden fears, unaddressed boundaries, or even misplaced values. The revolution is the brave new ending you write. After the deep dive of the rumble, you emerge with clarity. For my proposal, I might realize I hadn't adequately addressed a key stakeholder's concerns, or that my presentation style didn't resonate with this particular audience. Perhaps I needed to spend more time understanding the why behind their skepticism. The revolution isn't about forgetting the fall. It's about integrating the hard-won wisdom. It's about taking those insights and translating them into tangible, courageous actions for the future. You're not just recovering, you're evolving. Most leaders think they can just move on after a setback, pushing past the pain. But without actively processing that experience through the reckoning, rumble, and revolution, those falls leave unaddressed wounds that manifest as armor, cynicism, or risk aversion. Therefore, this framework isn't a luxury. It's a strategic imperative for continuous growth and truly daring leadership. Imagine waking up tomorrow, knowing that no matter what challenge the day brings, you possess a tested, reliable process to transform any setback into a powerful launchpad. This is where knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. You don't just know how to rise, you embody it. If you're ready to transform your professional and personal setbacks into profound strengths, subscribe to Audiobook Bites so you don't miss our deep dives into the tools and frameworks that build true daring. The bottom line, true daring isn't about never falling, it's about mastering the art of the rise. 7. The Daring Leader's Legacy. Daring leadership isn't a singular achievement, a trophy collected and put on a shelf. It's a continuous practice, a daily commitment to courage, vulnerability, and trust building. It's about cultivating brave work, having those tough conversations, and leading with whole hearts. Think of it like a muscle you work every single day. The Asaro tribe teaches us knowledge is only rumor until it lives in the bones. This isn't just about reading the book, it's about embodying it, letting these principles become part of your very being. You might be thinking, this sounds great, but I'm already overwhelmed. Who is this not for? Here's the catch. Daring leadership is not for those content with the status quo, for those who choose comfort over courage. It's not for leaders unwilling to lean into discomfort, to face the fears that whisper, I'm not enough. But it gets worse. Ignoring these truths squanders your potential. Therefore, if you truly want to transform yourself and your organization, you must commit. Imagine waking up tomorrow, not dreading a difficult conversation, but feeling a quiet confidence, grounded in your values. When you show up, truly show up, something shifts. You're not just managing tasks, you're building a culture. Your legacy won't merely be in what you accomplished, but in the ripple effect of the courage you inspired and sustained. It's a culture where people feel safe enough to innovate, to fail forward, to bring their whole selves to work. Remember, it is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly. This is your arena. So here's your tangible commitment. Identify one armored behavior you're ready to shed this week. Perhaps it's the urge to numb discomfort, or to hustle for your worth. Choose one small act of daring leadership to replace it. Will you practice setting a clear boundary? Or will you initiate a tough conversation you've been avoiding, starting with a rumble starter like, the story I'm making up? Reflect on this. The long-term impact of that single courageous step, repeated daily, will not only deepen your own self-trust, but will visibly empower those around you to step into their own arenas. They'll watch you, learn from you, and begin to lead with their own whole hearts. The bottom line, daring leadership is the conscious choice to step into the arena every single day, knowing your effort will carve a path of courage for yourself and for generations of leaders to come. If you're ready to make that courageous choice and continue building a culture of daring leadership, subscribe to Audiobook Bites. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into transforming your leadership journey.